Sometimes, God speaks loudly. Through pain, through sudden turns of fate, through what we call signs from above. And sometimes, He is silent. So silent, that it feels like He isn't there at all. We start to worry, to question, to lose faith. But maybe, that silence isn't His absence. Maybe, it's His invitation into stillness. Today, I'll tell you a story about a man who spent his whole life trying to hear God's voice. And finally did, where he least expected. On the edge of a big city, where the streets smelled of rain and dust, and the windows reflected only neon lights, lived a man named Ethan. He worked in a large company. His days were full of meetings, phone calls, and endless plans. He knew how to manage people, solve problems, and meet goals. But he didn't know how to feel alive. Every day was the same. Every night left him emptier. He prayed briefly, automatically, more from habit than hope. He believed, but didn't feel his faith anymore. As a child, he used to go to church with his mother. He remembered how sunlight streamed through stained glass. How the incense filled the air. How the bells echoed across the fields. Back then, he felt that God was everywhere. In the light, the air, the sound. But now, he only heard noise. The noise of life, of his own restless mind. Sometimes at night, he would whisper into the dark, "Lord, can you hear me?" And all he heard back was silence. One morning, something in him simply broke. He sat on the edge of his bed and stared at the floor. "I can't do this anymore," he whispered. Work had lost its meaning, friends had drifted away, and prayer had become a ritual without a heartbeat. So he packed a small bag and left the city. No plan. No map. Just the quiet pull to go somewhere else. After 2 days of wandering, he found himself at an old monastery hidden deep in the mountains. The road there was narrow and winding. The rain had soaked him through, the wind bit at his face. But when he finally reached the gate, he felt something lift from his shoulders. Like he had left all the noise far behind. The monastery was small. White walls, stone paths, an old bell tower echoing softly over the valley. At the entrance stood an elderly monk, his robe worn, his eyes full of peace. "You came to hear God, didn't you?" the monk asked. Ethan froze. "Yes." "How did you know?" The monk smiled. "No one comes here for any other reason." They gave Ethan a small cell. A wooden bed, a candle, a cross. And a window that opened to the mountains. Every morning began with a bell. The brothers prayed before dawn, worked in silence, ate in silence. And the stillness wrapped everything like a gentle blanket. But for Ethan, silence was unbearable. He tried to pray, but thoughts scattered like frightened birds. He wanted to hear something from God, a word, a sign, anything. But there was nothing. Only stillness. After several days, Ethan went to the abbot. "Father," he said, "I've prayed, I've waited, but there's only emptiness. Why won't God speak?" The monk looked at him calmly. "Are you sure you're listening?" Ethan frowned. "Of course I am. That's why I'm here." The monk smiled gently. "Then go to the garden. Don't pray. Don't think. Just sit. Silence will teach you more than words." So he went. The monastery garden was old and wild. Apple trees leaning with age. Grass swaying in the wind. A place forgotten by time. He sat on a worn wooden bench beneath a tree. At first, it was boring. Then it became unbearable. The silence was too loud. His mind screamed for distraction, a phone, a song, a voice. But he stayed. And then, he heard. Not a voice. Not words, but the sound beneath all sounds. The drop of rain on a leaf. The distant hum of the earth. The soft sigh of the wind moving through the trees. He realized, everything was alive. Everything breathed the same breath. The next day he came back. Not to listen for something, but simply to be. And the longer he sat in stillness, the lighter his heart became. It was as if an unseen hand touched it gently. Like a parent calming a frightened child. He closed his eyes and, for the first time in years, he felt peace. Not excitement. Not answers. Just quiet, holy peace. And in that peace, was God. When he finally returned to the abbot, the monk asked, "So, did you hear him?" Ethan smiled softly. "Yes. But not the way I expected. God didn't speak to me. He was already speaking, all along. I just never stopped long enough to listen." The monk nodded. "That's how it is. God rarely shouts. He whispers. And only a quiet heart can hear him." We often search for God in thunder. In miracles, in answers, in signs. But he is in the softest places. In a flickering candle. In the sigh of wind. In the silence between our thoughts. God doesn't disappear. He simply waits. For us to stop making noise. To slow down. To breathe. To let our hearts grow still. Like morning over the mountains. And then, in that stillness, we finally hear his voice. Not loud. Not distant. But close. Like a whisper that says, "I've been here all along."